Welcome back, friends. Look, I know I got this thing on my face. It's over there. But that's what you get for daily videos. You hear me when I'm sick. You hear me when I've got some little acne flare-ups as a man in my 30s, etc. That's our deal. Anyhow, I'll get into it. What I want to share today is actually a just small memory of a man I met. He was actually the owner of a vegan restaurant in Pittsburgh. This place is long since gone. It was called Zen Garden at the time. And like I said, the guy was an owner of the place, and just kind of he'd seen that I pretty frequently came to the location, brought different friends all the time. I'm vegan, been vegan for many years, and so I'd introduce a bunch of my friends to it, and they often liked it, and they'd come back, so he appreciated I was doing that. So he kind of introduced himself. We just talked about, who he is, his background, and so on. And he shared this little point that kind of stuck with me, even though I haven't applied it necessarily in the same way. And what he shared was that, he's in the profession. If he deals with food, he decides what's on menus, he manages the business side too. But that for his own food needs, he's also a vegan person. He ran a completely vegan restaurant. He had made a choice to basically consume as few calories as he could and still be healthy, right? He's not being malnourished. He's not starving himself. He wasn't extremely skinny looking or something like that. He was just made a choice to figure out how to eat nutritionally, sustainably, decently to his health. And as part of that, he minimized his energy usage. This was kind of a smaller, curious thing for me, because at the time, this was back when I was still doing mixed martial arts. And so as part of that, the exercise routine we come off of from being wrestlers was basically enormously high calorie usage. It was exercise a ton, run a ton, lift a lot of weights, burn through a ton of calories, eat a ton of calories to be able to support that intense output. And that this guy was saying that he was consciously living the opposite. He made a choice to use fewer calories and to consume fewer calories. And for him, it was about kind of harmony. It was about kind of reducing energy waste. It was about just sort of to him, it was kind of a peaceful existence compared to high intake and high output. To maintain roughly the same kind of, again, modestly healthy existence. He also didn't seem like a supreme health nut or anything like that. Just that was a distinction. Used fewer calories, consumed fewer calories. And I think that sort of there was an echo for that for me when I later became obsessed with Henry David Thoreau's Walden, my favorite book, because I've read some passages from here before. One of my favorite books. And in which obviously kind of Thoreau's thinking was lots of people in their lives seemed to perceive as if the goal of life was to earn as much money as they could and spend as much money as they could. That they had to spend more money, and to do so they had to earn more money, and that it was all about this machine of how much they could pipe through themselves. That people's lives got all carried away in different kinds of problems and issues and challenges precisely because they insisted on keeping both those levels very high. So I'm sure you can see the analogy I'm drawing here to our friend, his name is Teddy, owner of, at the time, Zen Garden, of lower calorie use, lower calorie intake, and that Thoreau's answer to the hurried pace of life was lower income, lower spending. Now, there's obviously complications and challenges to that, right? This is not a simple thing. It's not as straightforward as, I don't mean to glorify that everything's easy somehow, or that should be everyone's choice. Unfortunately, because of the way at least things work here in the United States, healthcare, education, all kinds of things like that obviously are tied up in financial means in a way that is hard to avoid, unfortunately. But it did speak to this difference that at least can be adapted, I think, right? Again, reasonably adapted into the mindset of, okay, well, lower use and basically lower output, lower input. And thinking about the trade-offs, the differences that introduces for us. One of the people I saw at GDC, he had a terrific talk. It was about even just changes in the games market he's seen from 2014 to 2018. Jason Rower. Long ago, he made Passage, and he used to have these articles online. I think they're actually still there, about how he had kind of opted to live a simpler life, to spend less, to use less energy in a way, to live where it was more affordable, to, in that way, I think helped enable him, not in any negative way, to pursue making games that were innovative in ways different than what the market rewarded. Right? So lots of people heard about his games, like Passage is one of the early art successes he had. People heard about him, people talked about him, people studied him, they were a big deal in academia, they were a big deal in the arts community. I believe I know he has. He's made games that I've seen shown in museums. But that doesn't mean he was wealthy from that. It meant he had found a way to prioritize what was important to him about his output and important to him about his work in a way that would have been harder if he had been living under super expensive circumstances, where the only way to afford that would have been to have done things in a totally different way, to have had to prioritize what's selling right now. And this is actually part of what made this talk that he gave at GDC, which I'll link from the comments here because it's a free talk in the vault from GDC, even from this year. At least it's free right now at the time of this video. Worth checking out this talk. But one of the bizarre things about it is that his most recent game, or one of his most recent games, has earned him a lot of money. It's done very well for him. He's doing in a very different situation now, financially, than he was then. Again, this is not private or secret. This is part of his talk, was just how well it's doing for him. But that actually came from that space in which he was enabling himself to explore, to experiment, to pursue things differently. Because for so many years, and this is not a part he talks about in his talk, but it's part of, you know what, I'll link as well. I'll find that article he wrote about his simpler living. I'll link that as well. Just to compare and contrast, I think there's a fascinating look there. But that he had created that space for him to be able to explore those things without those same market pressures attached to, this is what I got to do right now because this is what sells. This is how I got to do it because this is how it sells. And I guess even though so much of what my focus has been, and for many years has been, of making sure I'm supporting people who make games as a hobby, people who make games recreationally, people who make games in low pressure environments where there's no money thrown into it, but it's also not under pressure to make back huge sums of money, has been in part to foster that kind of experimentation. Maybe in a very different sense, right? I mean, the kind of games I've been able to help oversee or initiate or help see across the finish line, they're not museum kind of stuff. They're not theoretician, academic kind of discussion stuff, but they are, in many ways, a chance to explore something different that serves some other priority than what things have to make it in the survival of fittest environments of return on investment and other kind of market considerations. So, anywho, to go back to the beginning, right? To me, it was just this interesting, this model that Teddy had talked to me about at Zen Garden, about that he used fewer calories and so he consumed fewer calories, and that for him was a balance that he preferred what went with that. And that is even separate from whether or not that's how anyone particularly chooses to do it with food, right? I mean, that's not what I do with food. I eat a normalish amount. I exercise to kind of compensate or set off the calories or keep my metabolism up or whatever. But that's a model we can use to apply to other areas of our lives. And thinking about how we use our time and thinking about how we choose to allocate our investments and our efforts and how we, I think you got the idea. Anyway, thanks for being here. Thanks for listening. Have an overview tomorrow.